Hey guys, here is a great picture on page 16. We're going to do page 16 and 17 of chapter 1, lesson 2. Here's a great picture of the water cycle. As you can see in the sky, it starts with condensation, which creates those clouds. Condensation is water vapor that cools and forms droplets, and that's what creates clouds. The clouds get heavy with that rain, and it can no longer hold it anymore, so precipitation falls in either rain or snow. And then it gets put into our water sources, lakes, and then or streams or rivers, and then it is evaporated back up into the sky, that where water changes from regular water to water vapor. So we are going to continue on with reading. Here's a word-wise suffixes. The suffix tion means the action of. How does knowing the meaning of this suffix help you better understand the meaning of condensation, evaporation, and precipitation? So think about those words and what it actually means. And remember that tion means the action of. So water and climate. Another important feature of water and climate is humidity. Humidity is the amount of water in the air. Humidity is kind of like, when your hand sticks to paper, obviously if you're not sticky, but like your arms are really, really sticky during the summertime, or you get really, really wet. And it's not only because you're hot, but also because it's really, really sticky. And that's where your humidity is. Like your paper sticks to you, your clothes sometimes stick to you. It's really just gross feeling. So humidity is the amount of water in the air. You can't see this water, but sometimes you can feel it. And when humidity is high, the air feels damp. Water gets into the air by evaporation. In this process, the sun heats the oceans, lakes, and rivers. Heat changes some of the water into a gas called water vapor. This vapor rises into the air. High in the air, water vapor cools and forms small droplets. This process is called condensation. The droplets gather together to form clouds. Inside the clouds, small drops combine to form bigger drops. Finally, the drops fall to the ground as precipitation. The drops fall as rain, snow, or sleet, depending on the temperature of the air. Most precipitation falls on water, since most of the earth is covered by water. Rain that falls on land soaks into the ground. It also runs into the streams and the rivers, which flows into lakes or back into seas or oceans. Then the water cycle begins all over again. Page 7. Page 17. Other climate factors. What other factors affect the climate of a place? One factor is location. Now, this factor is different than the factors we talked about in math. The factors we talk about in math are numbers. These factors are kind of like things that make up something else. So one factor, one thing that makes up climate, that affects the climate, is the place. So that's one thing that affects climate. Places near the equator receive the most direct sunlight. The equator is an imaginary line that circles the Earth, halfway between the North Pole and the South Pole. As you move away from the equator, the climate gets warmer, which kind of explains why, or clearly explains, I should say, why, when we looked at the temperatures for January on page 14, I do believe it was, back here, or 15? Page 15, when we looked at the temperatures for January, why closer up here to Canada was so much colder than down here by Texas, because the equator is down here. So California, Arizona, Southern California, Arizona, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, those are all super, super close to the equator compared to New Jersey, and that's why it's so much warmer over there. Okay, so what other factors affect the climate of the place? One factor is locations. Places near the equator receive the most direct sunlight. The equator is an imaginary line that circles Earth halfway between the North Pole and the South Pole. As you move away from the equator, the climate gets colder. Primary source. So remember, our primary sources are from somebody that actually experienced it. As you stand at this point on the 45th parallel, you are halfway between the equator and the North Pole. Historical marker at Stewartstown, New Hampshire. Lakes and oceans also shape the climates of a place. They affect the amounts of precipitation that falls. They can also can affect the temperature. In winter, water is often warmer than land. Winds from the water warm the air nearby. In summer, breezes blow from the water and cool the nearby air. The climate of the place also is affected by elevation, or how high the land is above the sea level. Places at high elevations are generally colder than lower areas. Wind also contributes to climate and weather. Winds bring air of varying temperatures and humidity from one place to another. So here's a great representation of elevation. So that's talking about height. Here's the sea level. So that's where the ocean is. And then how much further things go up. So if you look at the Ponderosa Pines, they're between about 5,000 and 7,000 feet in elevation. So 5,000 to 7,000 feet above sea level. So this is really interesting. So now do me a favor, go to your notes pages, fill out your notes pages for classwork. Thanks so much. And remember, you're only doing page 16 and 17.